The Bride of Amman was published in 2012 and was a controversial bestseller. Some loved it and some loathed it. And in it, Fadi Zaghmout describes the lives of 4 young women and 1 gay man, and how society interferes with who they are, who they want to be, or even could want to be. So now it's to Fadi.
Thank you for coming. I usually summarize The Bride of Amman. It's about the obsession that we have in the Arab world in marriage, the institution of marriage. And marriage is a very important institution for us, Arab, for our society, and it's considered like the gate to society. If you're not married, then you'll always be on the side of society. And the characters of the book are the characters who can't get married for different reasons, because marriage for us is still religious marriage in Jordan. So for instance, if a Christian woman, one of the characters, loves a Muslim man, they can't get married. Also, there is the issue that the gay man in the story, because we don't recognize same-sex marriage, and civil marriage is not there. So, and he's pressured as a man to get married, so he gets married to a woman. And she's in the book also, she tells the story from her perspective, and he tells the story from his perspective. There's also, like, women's sexuality is not acknowledged, and for a woman to get married, she has to be virgin. So if she loses her virginity, then it's hard for her to get married. And one of the characters, her father sexually abuses her, and she loses her virginity, and she struggles to get married. And also, the age of women is important. We prefer that women get married before they reach a certain age. So there's a big pressure on women in Jordan to get married. At the same time, they can't go out and date, and they can go and propose to men, so they have to wait. And also there's a pressure on them to get married before they reach a certain age. So these are the characters of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So so we start, we will read some passages in Arabic and some of them in English. I start with Layla. She's the one who gets married to the gay man. At the beginning of the book, it opens while she gets graduated and with an honor degree, the top of her class, and her mother throws a party for her. But once she reached to the party, everyone was like telling her congratulations, and now it's about time to get married. So I will start reading. She says, دخلت البيت مثل عروس على زغاريد النساء معتزة بنفسي وبإنجازي فرحت بهذا العدد من النساء المجتمعات للاحتفال بنجاحي زغردت أمي بصوت عال ضمتني إلى صدرها وهمست في أذني عقبال العريس تركتني أمي فتلقفني صدر خالتي التي ضمتني هي الأخرى وهمست عقبال ما نشوفك في بيتك. نظرت إلى عيون النساء الأخريات وسرحت في همساتهن. ما شاء الله صايرة عروس. إن شاء الله بتجوزيها وبتفرحي فيها. إن شاء الله شاطرة في الطبخ كمان. اتجهت بنظري نحو أختي الكبرى سلمى. كانت تجلس بجانب جدتي صامتة وسرحانة في تعليقات النساء. جدتي أيضا صمتت ظهرا ونطقت كفرا. هزت رأسها وتمتمت. أنا عارفة، أنا تجوزت على 14. كانوا يجوزونا صغار مش مثل هالأيام. يلا إن شاء الله يكون حظك أحسن من حظ أختك. بلاش تبوروا أنتو جوز. اصفر وجه سلمى لصفحة 6. راقبتها وهي تحاول حبس الدمعة في عينها. فشلت. خجلت من نفسها وانسحبت إلى غرفتها. حاولت اللحاق بها لأواسيها فاستوقفتني صيحات البنات والزغاريدهن. أسرعت نحو مصدر الضجيج متسائلة شو في؟ أتاني جواب من هبة ابنة عمي أنا حامل. اجتمعت معظم النساء حول هبة كان الاحتفال معد لها. لم أعد أنا عروس الحفل فالعروس لا تتوج دون رجل. حقيقة أيقنتها في لحظة خاطفة هزت عرش كياني. سنين عدة أهدرتها بينما أحاول أن أبرهن تفوقي. اعتقدت أن شهادتي سترفعني في عيون الجميع وترسخني شخصا كاملا مستقلا. لكن وفي لحظة خاطفة كلمح البرق صعقتني حقيقة أن شهادتي ما هي إلا خطوة أخرى نحو الهدف الأكبر، الزواج.
I couldn't hold back the tears and ran away to hide in my room. I was furious with myself and even more so with her. I scolded myself, not just for being weak, but also for being selfish. How could I forget that today was Layla's happy day? How could I wallow in my own misfortune and ruin my sister's party with my own full mood? What right did I have to dwell on my despair about the future on the very day when she was so excited about hers? When I saw the look on her face, I realized that the bullet my grandmother had shot was ringing in her ears too. Her eyes were suddenly forced open to the scenario I am stuck in, the fear that starts to spread like an ulcer through the mind of a girl at Layla's age. An unplucked fruit left to rot. How could my grandmother say such a vile thing? To reduce us both to a piece of fruit that no one wants to taste. 30, the dreaded expiry date. I associate it with death. It's the first time a girl dies in a society that can't wait to write its daughters off as old maids. The word makes me shudder. The countdown begins as soon as you graduate, sometimes even before. It's a race against the clock, a marathon of a race where every woman is scrambling to the front to bag herself a husband. You have to use your female wiles in the survival of the fittest, where survival means being lucky enough to be snapped up. But the door to the other side gradually creaks shut as the clock ticks towards the age of 30, when you are written off as surplus goods, marked down as a social failure and condemned to a marginal role on the fringes of society. Sometimes I try to shut my eyes and ignore the dreaded number, but everyone seems to insist on reminding me. The latest was Mona, a good friend of mine, who finished the marathon last year at the grand old age of 29. She had no shame about sighing with relief in front of me. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, thank God I managed to get married before I was 30. This was, I forgot to mention before, this was Salma speaking, the sister of Layla.
Yeah, the older sister.
The older sister.
So now you read Hayat also.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, it's you.
Yeah.
You want to give an introduction about Hayat? Yes, her father abuses her.
This is the story of Hayat, who is abused by her father, but not in this part. It took a while for my boss's words to sink in. She was sacking me from my job in her dressmaking sweatshop, and she was saying it with the same mix of patronizing bluntness and disdain that I'd got used to over the past few months. I don't employ filthy girls, she said, looking down her nose at me. The reputation of a workplace is the reputation of its employees. So I spat in her face and walked out. My entire body was shaking from nerves. I was shocked by her spiteful tone and overtaken by feeling of injustice and exploitation, and that also familiar sense of dread about the future, a fear that's been with me all my life. It was pouring with rain that day in the streets around Swafiya, but I kept on walking aimlessly like a zombie, plodding onwards but without any kind of conscious intention. My modest salary had just evaporated, and along with it my dream of finishing university. How on earth could I pay for the fees now? It was out of the question. I've had so much going on in my head and in my life over the past few months. It hasn't been easy working with that emotionless witch of a boss, always speaking down to us and treating us like slaves. She takes advantage of our weakness and the fact that we rely on her measly wages, and she's always threatening to fire us over the slightest thing, claiming that there are hundreds of girls queuing up to work for her, or even to do the same job for a lower wage. We just have to put up with it and work overtime whenever she tells us to. We are used to working at weekends and on holidays, and to having our pay docked for whatever trivial reason she thinks up. And we are powerless to complain because we all need the job. There just isn't anything better out there. I sped up my footsteps, fleeing from a vision of the malicious pleasure my dad takes in hollering at me. The faster I went, the louder his voice rang out in my ears. And where's your brother's share? The amount I contribute is never enough. He's always trying to control what's left of my wages. Sometimes it seems like he's jealous of me being able to look after myself, while he himself is struggling to meet our basic needs. He's always putting obstacles in front of me and coming up with problems out of thin air. And he haunted my mind as I ran home, towards him, towards the house, the question going round and round my head, what am I going to do? All I knew was that I couldn't bear to face him. There was no way I could justify losing my job. He would probe for details and would try to find out what happened from my boss. He might just ring her and ask her straight out, or even go around there and ask her to take me back. I told myself I'd deny whatever she told him and accuse her of lying. Surely he'd believe me? No, I couldn't count on it. Perhaps I'd just tell my mum. She'd give me a bit of breathing space for a few days. And who knows, I might even find another job that could save me from a confrontation with my father. I should have known that my boss would hear about me and Kais. Girls are such gossips, and I haven't been particularly secretive. Especially as I fell in love so bad. I found it impossible to keep my feelings to myself. I couldn't help sharing snippets about our relationship with my friends at work, letting them know how things were going.
So we continue talking about Hayat and about her relationship with this married man. She said, غضب مني قيس أول أمس لم يعد يكتفي بمداعبتي وتقبيلي أراد أن يدخل فيه قال أنه يريد أن يشعر بعلاقتنا مكتملة وبأنني لست نصف حبيبة بل امرأة كاملة يشاركها كل ما يشارك به زوجته. طلبت منه أن ينتظر إلى أن يترك زوجته ويتزوجني فأنا لن أفرط بعذريتي قبل الزواج. لم يعجبه ذلك فهو كما يقول لن يستطيع تركها الآن ويحتاج إلى عدة شهور لإنهاء الأمور معها. لم أصدقه مع أنني كنت أتمنى أن تكون ثقتي به أكبر وأن أعطيه نفسي كاملة لكنني لم أستطع. ربما هو صوت صديقتي في المشغل أو هو صوت المنطق أو ربما هو غريزة البقاء ما كان يمنعني. لا أعرف لكن هناك خطا أحمر كنت أعرف جيدا أنه يجب أن ألا أتخطاه. كل علاقتي بقيس لا تبرر طردي من شغلي. هذه حياتي وشأني الخاص. ليس من حق هذه السيدة أن تحكم علي بهذا الشكل. هي لا تعرف طبيعة علاقتي بهم ولا تعرف طبيعة علاقته هو بزوجته. أنا لم أكن لأسمح لنفسي بحب رجل متزوج لكنني جررت إلى حبه من دون وعي أو تفكير فيما قد تؤول إليه هذه العلاقة من تبعات. احتجت إلى رجل يعيد الأمل إلى حياتي إلى فارس ينتشلني من بيت أبي ويتوجني ملكة في بيته. أنا ومنذ نعومة أطفالي يجذبني رجال تعساء. لماذا؟ لا أعرف. ربما لأن رسم ابتسامة على وجه أبي كان تحديا يعصف بي طوال طفولتي أو ربما لأن تعاستي تجد رفقة في تعاسة الآخر فلا أشعر بالغربة في أحضانه.
The next part is about Laila. And she's being harassed by her boss, and so she's thinking about putting on the veil to be safe at her job. The other day, when I got home, after closing the door to my room behind me, I found a stretch of fabric and started to wrap it around my head. I stared at myself in the mirror. Am I still pretty like this? I asked my reflection. My nose was first to reply. It stood out more than usual, as though it had assumed a bigger area of my face. Horrified, I pulled off the fabric and flung it aside, spreading my hair out over my shoulders. Picking up my brush, I gently combed it, carefully smoothing it out. My hair, with its rich color and delicate curls, is what makes me who I am, what makes me feminine. Like any other woman, of course I care about my looks and want to be beautiful. I love it if I get an admiring glance. It's like a buzz, it's a little buzz, which reminds me of my femininity. I could never be described as strikingly beautiful, but I've learned over the years how to take care of my appearance and make the best of my features, and how to emphasize my femininity. I think my hair is my best weapon, and having my hair done always makes me feel great, like a new woman. At the end of the day, every woman wants to look attractive, and her hair is one of her most important assets. I do worry that wearing a veil would hide away my best feature and make me less pretty, and I'm afraid that it could also reduce my chances of finding a husband.
Layla continues, as she says, تعبت من هذا السيناريو المتكرر. هذه ليست أول مرة أتزين وأعرض نفسي فيها. اعتدت أن يطرق باب دارنا عريس بين فترة وأخرى. منذ سنوات وأنا أتابع عرسان سلمى وأتابع اعتراضها ونفورها من هذه المواقف. كانت ترفض هذه الطريقة التقليدية للزواج. تشعر بالإهانة وقلة القيمة في عرض نفسها للناس ليقرروا إن كانت جيدة أم لا. شعرت بالشعور نفسه مرارا وتكرارا. حاولت الاعتراض كل مرة ولكن أمي لم تترك لي المجال. تعطي الناس موعدا وتضعني تحت الأمر الواقع. يمتد الضغط النفسي والعصبي لأيام بعد زيارة عائلة العريس. تستعمل أمي أسلوب الترغيب والترهيب لإقناعي به بغض النظر عن تقبلي له. ترفض أن أحكم عليه من أول جلسة وتصر على أن أتعرف عليه وأكثر وأعطيه فرصة. تعدل محاسنه كما ذكرتها أمه وتشدد على وضعه المادي والحياة الرغدة التي قد أعيشها معه. أصر على رفضه وعدم تقبل له فتظهر وجهها الآخر. تحمل اللون الأسود وتبدأ بتلوين ملامح مستقبلي. ترسم خطا أسود يحدد ملامح طموحي الوظيفي في بؤرة التعب والإجهاد. ترسم خطا آخر يلعب على وتر الوحدة وحاجتي إلى الحب والعائلة. تتابع الرسم مع إصراري على الرفض. تشعر بأن حبر قلمها على وشك أن يجف فتخرج كل ما في جعبتها. وترسم بطاقة سوداء كبيرة تكتب عليها كلمة عانس وتشهرها في وجهي.
The next part is again about Hayat, this time in trouble with her father. "So, who's a big girl now then?" he said as he came closer and whispered in my ear. "You've started drinking too?" I felt queasy when I smelled the alcohol on his breath. Paralyzed with fear, I didn't know how to respond. My heart began to race, as desperate as me to escape, as though it had a clearer memory than I did of what he used to do in those days. You want me to give you a driving lesson?" he asked. I shook my head, racking my brains for a way out of this awful situation. For a few minutes, I managed to convince myself that I probably misread the way he was looking at me, or that it was a fleeting look that had passed, that he really had changed dramatically in the past few months. But unfortunately, my instinct was not mistaken. I should have known that the torment I endured for years was not over yet. I should have known that this would obliterate any feeling of safety, leaving me lost, crushed beneath the world's feet, ripped to shreds by its teeth. Later, it would seem that fate had conspired to play along with him that night, and the moon didn't stand by passively either. They all ganged up together to play some satanic game in which I was the victim. The Madaba Dead Sea Road was pitch black, with no street lamps to light the way. The moon chose to hide that night and was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps the moon had given my father her blessing for his crime, or perhaps she was ashamed to witness it. I was alone with my father. I drove in silence, praying to God over and over in my heart, begging him to stand at my side and let me get through the night safely. But God did not listen. He also hid and abandoned me to my destiny. I was completely alone when my father started to run his hand across my thigh.
Later on she continues saying, حاولت أن أستعطفه. بابا ليش بتعمل هيك؟ أنا حياة بنتك. نظرت إلى عينيه علني أوقظ فيهما نظرة إنسانية في قلبه. اقترب مني وحاول أن يشدني إليه. أبعدته بقوة وتبعت. تتذكر لما أنا انولدت؟ أنت سميتني حياة. أنا حياة طفلتك. لكنه لم يكن يسمع ليتذكر. كان كل همه أن يجد طريقة لإخضاعي والسيطرة علي. اقترب مني أكثر فأكثر إلى أن استطاع الإمساك بي، ثم بطحني على الأرض. هجم علي بكل قوته ومزق ملابسي يعريني بينما أقاوم وأصرخ وأصارع. كتم صرخاتي بأصابعه وشل حركتي بجسده. لم يتبقى لجسدي من ردة فعل سوى الدموع التي تساقطت بحزن على تراب شهد أبشع وجه رأيته أنا لهذه الدنيا. توقف فجأة وكأن الكابوس قد انتهى، وكأن شيئا لم يكن. دعاني إلى السيارة وقاد بي إلى البيت وهو صامت.
about Tama.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, here also I have a sub-character for the transsexual man, and I'm comparing because, like, if you're a gay man in Arabic society, if you're masculine, so and you walk on the street, so no one notices it, so you get away with it. But if you're flamboyant or act feminine in the street, you get harassed and abused. So here there is Ali, and he's about to get married to Layla, and he's worried when suddenly a friend of his who's feminine like come to and say hi to him, because he doesn't want anyone to know about him. So yeah. في يوم من الأيام حصل ما كنت أخشاه. فجأة ظهر تامر، شاب مصري التقيته في بيت صديق ذات يوم، وإذ به ينادي باسمي ويسرع إلى احتضاني. سلمت عليه باقتضاب. حاولت إبعادها عن ليلى وتحاشي تعريفه إليها. شعرت بتأنيب الضمير ليلتها لعلمك بكم المصائب التي مر بها هذا الشخص. لربما هو اليوم بحاجة إلى دعم الأصدقاء، ولربما ردة فعلي زادت من أحزانه. كان قد صبغ شعره باللون الأشقر وأطاله قليلا. يسرحه نحو الجهة اليسرى ويضع حلقا صغيرا في أذنه. رائحة برفان أنثوية قوية تفوح منه. وجهه يلمع من ابيضات مصطنع نتيجة المصاحيح التي يستعملها. مد يده بنعومة ودلع امرأة أرستقراطية نحوي. غمزني وهمس. هي دي العروسة؟ يا عيني على المزز. نظرت إليه بنظرة حادة كي يخفض صوته. انهيت الحديث بسرعة ووعدته بأن أكلمه خلال أيام. كان تامر رجلا مؤنثا أو امرأة كما يحلو أن يعرف نفسه. يسمي نفسه نوال بين أصدقائه لشدة إعجابه بالمغنية اللبنانية نوال الزغبي. يحفظ أغانيها كلها ويقلدها بحرفية. ينتهز كل فرصة تجمع للمثليين في حفل لارتداء ثياب امرأة وعرض مواهبه بتقليد الفنانات. عاش طفولته مع والديه في السعودية، ومنذ صغره وهو شديد النعومة. نمت معه حركات المؤنثة في كبره. أخبرني يوما بحادثة في طفولته عند وصوله إلى الصف الثالث الابتدائي. حصلت عند فصل الذكور عن الإناث من مدرسة واحدة إلى مدرستين. عاد باكيا إلى والده يسأله: لماذا وضعوه مع البنين وليس البنات؟ لأنك ولد يا بابا، أجابه والده. ولكنه رد: لا بابا، أنا بنت. وظل الأب مقتنعا بأن ابنه ولد، والولد مقتنع بأنه بنت.
Now, this section is about Tamar's experience in a prison in Egypt. Every single charge laid against Tamar was enough on its own to leave him exposed and gave the prison wardens ample pretext to treat him with contempt and aggression. His effeminate looks alone were enough to turn on one of the wardens who, like so many others, suffered from pent-up sexual frustration in the repressive Egyptian society, which refused to allow any kind of relationship between the two sexes outside the institution of marriage. The warden started off buttering him up gently, trying to lure him into satisfying his sexual desire. When Tamar rejected these advances, the guard turned violent, beat him, and raped him. His cries echoed around the prison, bouncing off the walls of the other cells. But the guard just got more fired up and turned even more brutal. When his father came to visit him in jail that day, Tamar didn't dare tell him what had happened. Shame held him back from admitting that he'd been raped. By the time he stood before the judge, though, he had plucked up the courage to mention it. He imagined that the judge might have a modicum of humanity in him and would stand up for justice. Tamar was almost bowled over from shock when he heard the judge's reply. Well, take a look at yourself. Who could blame them? Who could blame them? Tamar realized that he lived in the most chauvinistic society on the face of the earth, a society where femininity was seen as nothing more than the potential to turn men on and satisfy their sexual urges. It was a culture where it was the woman who was blamed for any kind of sexual liaison outside marriage, where a woman's natural expression of her femininity was seen as a free invitation to men to abuse her and treat her with contempt. This was a reversal of roles, where the definitions of criminal and victim were turned on their heads. A man could be the victim of desires that were aroused by a woman's slightest gesture. She was guilty, partly because his arousal was her doing. If he raped her, it was a natural response for which she alone would bear the consequences. Tama here was no different to any other woman in the eyes of the judge, who subscribed to all these same cultural prejudices. Tama's obvious femininity had provoked the guard to rape him, so he himself was to blame, and it was he who would face punishment.
Okay. Now this passage from Ali when he gets married to Layla and he's describing his first day with her. لقد حسبت ليلة عرسي أصعب امتحان في حياتي. كانت الرهبة تتقمص كل جزء من كياني، ولكني كأي امتحان آخر حضرت له واتكلت على الله. تحضيري كان باستشارة عدة مثليين آخرين متزوجين وغير متزوجين، وسؤالهم عن نصائح لإتمام تلك العملية التي أحسب لها 1000 حساب. لم أجرب الجنس مع امرأة من قبل، ولا يجذبني جسد المرأة، حتى ليلى وبقدر حبي لها فهي غير قادرة على استثارتي جنسيا. منهم من لم يستطع نصيحتي لأنهم يستصعبون أن يتخيلوا أنفسهم في موقف مرعب كهذا، ومنهم من نصحني بتناول حبوب فياغرا لكسب تحفيز جنسي. أما آخرون فاقترحوا بأن أحجز غرفة لسامر بجانب غرفتي في الفندق، أبدأ العملية مع سامر ليثيرني ومن ثم أنهيها مع ليلى. نصيحة غير عملية رفضناها كلانا أنا وسامر.
There was no escaping Layla. From the way she dressed, it was clear that she was ready and was expecting me to take the initiative. She had straightened her hair and put it up in a seductive way. She had put eyeliner and lipstick on, and a nice fragrance wafted from her. It was all very attractive, but it didn't turn me on. I moved closer to her. I put my arm around her and kissed her on the forehead and then on the lips. Her fragile, delicate body and her feminine perfume quashed all desire in me. For a moment I panicked, but I managed to calm myself down. I was afraid she would read something in my body language, and even more afraid that my body wouldn't play along, and I'd find myself in a very awkward position. I closed my eyes and tried to summon up the desire. I closed my eyes and imagined it was Samir in my arms instead of Layla. I was betraying her from the very first night our bodies came together. I couldn't complete the task without a man being present in my mind's eye and without the help of Viagra. It certainly wasn't easy. Without lust or desire, it wasn't sex. It was a feeling of repulsion, not of attraction. I had to endure it, to grin and bear it, though my whole body screamed at me to run. I tried to go with the flow and to move with her like when I'm making love to Samir. So I kissed her now and again, and when my tongue touched hers, I could sense her excitement, but I just felt queasy, this feeling of repulsion. I pulled away a little. Then I braced myself, took her in my arms, and kept going. That's it. Das war's.